welcome to Conversations with My Friends in AI. I'm your host, and I'm here today with Yujian. Thanks for joining us. Really excited to have you on. We're going to be talking
Thanks
through.
for having me.
Yeah, of course. Thanks for doing this. Today, we're talking through a really cool topic that I think will be exciting to the audience. So we're talking about how to translate your skill set between different roles in tech, and really going through like what are some of these roles in tech, and really how your skills will kind of flex between them. I know you've had a very interesting career path. I'm gonna kind of kick things off by telling a little bit about how we met, and I'll kick it over to you. I'd love to kind of hear about that career path and how you ended up where you are today. So we met honestly through LinkedIn. I think you were poking around on open source package rec metrics, which I'm trying to create package as like a one-stop shop for like metrics for evaluating a recommender system. It was a little bit old, it was a little bit out of date, and I think there was a gap with some of the metrics. And you just hit me up. You're like, hey, can I contribute to this? I was like, please do. Yes. I think I gave you full access to do whatever you want in that repo. It's been fantastic having your contributions in that open source community. Yeah, so thanks for doing that. And yeah, just talking to you a little bit as we were collaborating there, I really like to hear your perspective on like all things tech, vector databases, LLMs, all that cool stuff. So excited to have you here. I'd love to kick it off to you and just kind of tell us a little bit about your career path, the story, how you got to where you are today.
Yeah, okay. So I think I have a rather like interesting like career background. So I actually got started through interning at IBM because I participated in some like computer science competitions in high school, and I won ACSL twice, once as a freshman and once as a sophomore. And then I started interning at IBM through because like somebody, like the coaches for one of these teams had like reached out to me, and he like reached out to someone at IBM, and they were like, you should try this out. So I got to try that out. It was really interesting. It was like experiencing like working at a big tech company for the first time. And to be honest, I thought it was like not that great. But that could have just been because like as an intern, like these guys have so many things going on, right? Like now, like once you're like working like full time, you kind of like see it a little bit more. But like as an intern, you're just like you're just like, why aren't they paying attention to me? Why aren't they like telling me like what I could do with this stuff, you know? And then you realize like, oh, it's because they actually have like real work to do, right? But anyway, I went to college, and I went and did a bunch of stuff in machine learning. I did computer science. um let's see. So I interned at a startup. That was much more fun. It was like much more uh like the people were much more hands-on about it. They were much more like, hey, like we're kind of like working towards this like cool mission, as opposed to like more of like a like, here's what we're doing. We're just gonna do it. There's no like why behind some of it sometimes, right?
Yeah.
So that was kind of fun. Yeah. And then let's see. Then I did research in oh yeah, that's when I did my first research project, was the summer after. Is I got started doing working in a research lab doing neuro imaging research.
Wow.
Yeah, it was fun. It was like automatic segmentation of subcortical structures. Sometimes like segmentation and subcortical kind of get mixed up for me. But let's see, that was one of my first times kind of getting to know like this thing about like data, like the importance of like having good data, and the importance of having enough data, and like what like data augmentation kind of looks like. So yeah, that was an interesting like 2 years. So I ended up doing that for 2 years. Like the whole like rest of the time I was at UNC basically. Published that, turned that into a small paper at a state research conference. But oh right, I took a break from doing that for the summer after because I went to Florida. I went to Miami to go do another research camp thing. So this was really fun because I got to be in Miami, right? I got to go to the city a few times.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I got to publish a paper out of it. So this was like a really great one for
Living the
me.
dream. This is fantastic. Yeah.
I know, right? I was like, wow, I get to go to Miami, get to hang out in the city, get to go
I'm a
party, get to
published
publish a
author.
paper.
That's fantastic.
Yeah, I'm unpublished. Yeah, exactly. I was like, this is a good summer. So yeah, then that's actually how I ended up with my first full-time job out of college. So that paper got me to present at the IEEE Big Data Conference which was in Seattle, and some guy
Right,
from
yeah.
Amazon was there, and we talked, and he was like, you should apply for Amazon, and so I did, and so that's actually how I ended up getting my first job.
Wow.
Um, and then I worked at Amazon for a while. I worked on their auto ML system.
Hmm.
It was a lot of work. It was like really cool because it was a new project, and it was like awesome to work with like a really small team. It was like me and like three other guys. Like it was just like we had like a lot of like we had like a rather big project, and so it was like really cool to work with them. And then we got like I also got the experience of like having like working with other teams,
Yeah.
like where you have to like collaborate with your like sister teams on like a project. And I got my first experience of what they call like dotted line leadership.
Okay.
Like where you don't actually have you're not actually like someone's manager, or like the team lead or anything, but you have to kind of like drive certain things. So you have to like how to do that.
Got it.
So that
Yeah, you
was
gotta take
interesting.
ownership.
Yeah, yeah. And it
Yeah.
was really, really tough because I had no idea how to do it. Because, imagine like you're like right out of college and you're just
Yeah.
like, I have to tell people what to do. Like, what the hell?
What better way to
Um,
learn? You're just thrown in there.
yeah.
Wow.
Um, so yeah, I did that. We pushed out, I think I was part of like four projects or three projects. Only two of them got pushed out, but they made like, a few $1 million. And I was like, wow, okay, we're doing well. And then I was like, okay, well, obviously if you can generate a few $1 million working on an ML infrastructure tool, uh, inside of an ecosystem, perhaps you can also do that on the outside. So I
Yeah.
was like, I'm going to start a startup. And I didn't really know what I was doing, to be honest, but I knew how to build apps. So I was like, I'm going to build an app. And so I built an app. I was like, I'm going to figure out social media marketing because I don't know like other marketing formats. So I went and I figured out how to do some marketing on Instagram. We got like 5,000 some users on the app, but I just never figured out how to monetize it. So I was like, time to go do
Wow.
something else. Yeah. So that's how I got into the world of startups.
Yeah.
And I've just been working like part-time contracting or like full-time whatever as like a software dev for a while. You know how startups kind of are. Like some startups go through like especially early stage startups. I guess what is Rise now?
We're like 60
Is
something,
Rise
Series B. Yeah.
Series B? Okay, Series B. Yeah, so Zillow is also Series B, but like seed stage, early stage, like
Mhm.
pre-seed, Series A startups always are a little bit rocky.
Yep. Yep.
So yeah, yeah. So I kind of understand that. I kind of understood that as I was getting into it, and so I did a bunch of like contracting, part-time stuff. And oh yes, I made an API. So I started I created like a second product. Yes, I started a second company too because I actually took down the first LLC and I put up a second LLC, which actually in hindsight completely unnecessary because
Sure.
like the first one, like yeah, it's like completely unnecessary because it's in the same space. So
Yeah.
I started a second product. It was making like some amount of money, but I was just like, okay, like I don't really know what I'm going to do with this. And then ChatGPT came out, so I was doing something in the text processing space. GPT is a much, much better model that can do everything that I was doing plus
Mhm.
and more. And so I was like, okay, well, it's like you're like a regular person, you're like trying to fight Superman. So I was like, all right, well, this is not. I was like, I'm just like not prepared to do this, and I was like, I'm gonna go do something else. So then, as I was like interviewing, I interviewed with a bunch of companies. I kind of like talked to people about what they were doing, and like Zillow was like doing something really interesting where I was like, okay, like this is something that I think is gonna have like an impact on the next generation of like AI stuff because of the whole LLM stuff, because of the GPT stuff. So I was like,
Yes.
well, you know, I've seen like how powerful these tools can be. And so I think that like this would be a fun space to be in. So that's how I got to where I am now. Now I'm a developer advocate at Zillow. As part of creating my own API, I did a ton of content creation. And
Mhm.
that was also how I kind of got into being a developer advocate.
Very cool. Yeah,
So
that's quite
software
the journey.
engineering, lots of
Yeah.
software engineering, and then like messing around.
Yeah. Just builder, tinkerer. It's very interesting because as you talk me through that journey, I hear that you've made like a couple transitions. Like you started on the research side and then you transitioned like kind of into like industry with Amazon. And then after Amazon, you transitioned into the startup world. And so there's probably a lot of like um maybe some skills that you needed to learn to fit into each of those environments and kind of crush it in each of them. I'm curious to hear before we dive into like the main topic here. I am very curious to hear about that transition from like the research side into the industries. Are there any like tips or like learnings that you can share on that one? Because that is a hard transition.
Yeah, I think that for me, like I research was more or less like, here's this like interesting problem. and you get however much time you need, however much time you want, get it done and make it better. And you can continue to optimize it however much you would like. So I rewrote my code 4 times that summer when I got my publication that went to IEEE Big Data. And each
Yeah.
time I rewrote it, and then we reran the tests, and we just ran a ton of test data, and you can generate more test data. And you can just do this for, until you have to submit something, right? Versus like industry, it's like, we're doing this because it's going to make us money. Okay. Now, so because it's going to make us money, it has to be at here on a certain time. So industry is like very much like, they're like, you can sacrifice some, like there are some trade-offs, and you have to understand what the trade-offs are. And you have to understand that you can like sacrifice these trade-offs. You don't need to do the optimization. You're not like, and also like you're not necessarily looking for the best solution. It's almost like a machine learning model. You're looking for
Mhm.
locally like the best solution. What would work for us in terms of like time, like people power, like knowledge, like
Yeah.
money, and all of these different things. And so you kind of have to like put this together. Whereas in research, it's more like, like is your stipend like, are you still getting paid? Like, how long is it? Is it just like you're doing a PhD? You can kind of like, you can really do this for a while, or like, something else. So like, I think that that's like the main thing, is that like industry has like a different focus, and you just kind of, and like, I mean, all the skills that I needed to work at Amazon, I basically learned on the job. Like,
Okay.
did I know how to program Java before? Like, yes. Did I know how to program Java the way that they program Java?
Mm,
No. Right.
yeah.
And so
Okay.
it's like you kind of have to like learn everything on the job anyway, especially
I
at
think,
big companies. As
yeah.
far as I like startups, it's a little bit different. It's like you have to have like the same tooling as, if you're going to be a software engineer, you have to have the same tooling as like what the company uses, right? Um, or if you're going to do like DevRel, you have to be able to use the product.
Yeah, okay, that's really helpful to understand. I like how you're talking about like you didn't know everything you needed to do at Amazon. You just go in there and
Yeah.
figure it out. That's the best way to learn it. I do think that I learned more on the job than I did in school. In school, I just learned like what are the core concepts. Once you're on the job, you learn how to kind of apply that. Well, cool. That kind of
Yeah.
pivots
Yeah.
nicely into the next kind of topic here. I want to learn a little bit more about the developer advocate and talk us through like the different roles in tech and what a developer advocate even really is. When I first heard of it, I didn't know what it is, but it's a really fascinating role that I'd love for people to kind of learn a little bit more about.
Yeah. So I really like this role because for me, this is something that happens to fit my personality really well.
Yeah.
But I mean, there are a lot of roles in tech. The way that I think of developer advocacy is, okay, so I also want to say that like this is basically the same role as like DevRel, developer relations, or technical evangelism.
Okay.
These
Yeah.
are all basically the same role.
Different words, same
They have,
thing.
yeah, 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 exactly. Kitty corner, catty corner.
Yeah.
Um, so I think that the base of this role, the way I treat it is like, my job is to go out there and make sure that people understand the technology, that they can, oh, there's a B here. Okay. That they can use the technology,
Oh,
and that they can build on, like they can continue building after they take my tutorial, right?
yeah.
Like you want to, like, you can't just like give people like here's this tutorial. You got to say like, okay, here's this tutorial. Now, if you want to learn more, here's what you can build on top of it.
And then what? Yeah.
That's actually something that I've just recently figured out though.
Okay.
Um, but yeah, so I kind of see this as like, you go out there, you help people in the developer community learn how to use this technology, build this technology, you connect with the people in the developer community, you uh like go to, like mini events, and like you just got to like know what's going on. You got to find out like what are the problems that people are solving, what are the problems that people are facing that they need to be solving when it comes to your area, I guess, like what your industry, like what you're doing, right? So for me right now, it's like I'm my focus with vector databases is LLMs, is like how do you build LLM applications using a vector database, right? Because LLMs are really popular right now, so that's just what my focus is. Uh, and so I have to go out and I have to talk to people who are building these LLM applications, right? Who are like, it doesn't like, because otherwise I wouldn't know what's going on. I got to go talk
Yeah.
to people, and then like I got to hear like, oh, like I'm running into problems doing like, oh, I want to do citation, or oh, I want to filter for things from the last month, or oh, like I need to like query multiple documents, or oh, I need PDFs, or things like this. So people like tell you things if you kind of like go talk to them, and that's kind of like the main that's part of the job that I really like, is just like you get to go talk to a lot of people, you get to figure out what they're doing. I like of going to events. I'm decently extroverted in that manner. Um, let's see. I also like to create content. I like to write content. It helps me learn, to be honest, actually,
Mhm.
like
Yep.
creating content, like, and then writing a tutorial about how to like create like a piece of software is probably the best way to learn how to repeat creating that piece of software.
100%. Yeah.
Um, yeah. So that's like for me, I get kind of like both. I get to continue learning. I get to talk to people. Yeah, so that's what I like about it. Getting into it really, I think, if anybody wants to get into it, what they should first do is just I think there's kind of like two ways that you can kind of get into this career path.
Okay.
Um, so number one is there's like the software engineer like who is just like, actually, I'm probably more extroverted for this role
So you're
than
extroverted
like I
software
need to
engineer.
be. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah,
Okay.
yeah, yeah.
The software engineer who doesn't
Um,
alone in the office wants to be out talking to people.
right. Yeah. So that's like one kind of like way to get into it. And the other kind of way to get into it is if you're from like something else, like maybe like a PM, or you're like a marketer, or you're like
Okay.
a data
Yeah.
scientist or something like that. Like has like a variety of different skills. Is like you kind of like learn how to like code in like a certain language or something like
Mhm.
Python. So most commonly I see this for Python. And then you create some content around it. And then you get like kind of you like find out that there's this thing called DevRel. And then you like go and you're like, hey, I like making content, and I have like some of the skills necessary to do this. I can learn the rest of them, and so that's like the two kind of like personalities, I guess, or like types that I usually see in DevRel. I'm sure there are more ways to get here, but
Yeah.
that's usually just what I see. So I was like the software engineer who was like extroverted, and then I learned how to create content, right? So you kind of had this like you have kind of the bridge like both like the technical gap and like the content slash like events kind of like gap.
Gotcha. Okay. Yeah. So I'd like to kind of drill into that a little bit. I think you already touched on it a little bit, but I'd like to hear more about kind of like the technical competencies within these different roles. Like you've been on the software engineering side, being more on the developer advocate side of things. What are kind of like the skills where there was like clear crossover, or where you had to like ramp up your skills, or there was a big difference? What does that kind of look like for you?
Yeah. So I think the core competencies for software engineers is that you have to be able to build good software. And what that means is that you have to actually like understand like these different patterns. You have to understand what a factory pattern is, you
Mhm.
have to understand when you should use it. You should understand MVPs. You should understand front end, back end, connectors, APIs. You should understand scalability, extensibility, like reproducibility. Reproducibility is research. Not reproducibility,
What's the
reliability, right? It's got
yeah,
some
yeah.
uptime. Reliability, yeah, it's got uptime, right? It's like,
Yep.
oh, this has to have like 4 nines of uptime. Like, why? How are you going to do that? How many backups do you need? Like all these different things. You have to build good software. Um, but as a developer advocate, you really only need to know A, how do I code? And
Mhm.
B, how can I learn how to code quickly? And like C, if you are in cloud infra, then you need to know how do you build good software. So I can tell you how do you build good MVPs. Like I have like so you have like the build good software background, and if you take that into being a developer advocate, you'll actually see this. If you go online and you look at like different code examples, like code tutorials, you can kind of tell like whether or not this person comes from like a software background or not, because
Ah,
like longer ones, shorter ones you can't really tell, but like longer
yeah, no,
ones you
I
can kind
believe
of
it.
tell because
Yeah.
you can see the way they structure their code. And so you're like, oh, okay, like this is like, this is different. Whereas then you have like people who come from like a data science background, then you see like things like, okay, I'm using a Python notebook and it's going to be uh, very much like step by step kind of stuff and like things that I can rerun multiple times. And it's a different structure. And it's actually more popular, to be honest, using like doing the showing people how to do something in a Python notebook is actually really popular. People really like that.
It's very
So
accessible. Yeah.
yeah. So I would say like the you don't really need to even do most of the software engineering stuff in DevRel unless you're like doing really advanced things. In which case stuff might even be passed over to like sales engineers, like pre-sales engineers, right?
Gotcha.
They
Gotcha.
might just be like showing a customer like how do you put this
Yep.
onto my cloud infra.
It's interesting because as you talk through it, I notice something that maybe you and I have in common is like we used to be our customers. Every day I'm talking to like central
Oh
machine
yeah.
engineers, data scientists. I used to be that. And that's why I'm able to like understand their pain points, their day to day. I can articulate, hopefully well, the kinds of projects that they're working on because I've been there. And it sounds like you've probably been there too, because you mentioned you're like talking to people who are building LLMs for the first time. You need to be able to understand what kind of software skills that they're relying on as they try to build that out. And it sounds like kind of having that software background and then moving into an area where really more like collaborating with these people, you have that understanding, which is really cool to see.
Yeah, yeah. And then like skills you have to pick up from software to DevRel are mainly like,
Yeah.
how do I write good content? Like a lot of people can write, but what you can notice is that there are like people who are marginally better. It's like not even that they're a lot better. They're just like marginally better. And you only need to be marginally better to have people like your stuff.
That's such an
So I was like
engineering thing to
looking,
say.
it really is. You just have to be a tiny bit better. And so like I went
Just
and like I
measurable.
found out that like yeah, I like so I see a ton of tech blogs on Medium. I get to see people's Mediums all the time. And I
Mm,
see people who have like, like less than 100 followers and they have like 20 articles and I'm like, well, I mean like either A, you're not promoting your articles at all, which like why write them if you're not going to say anything about them unless you're just like this is my learning experience, but then don't post them on Medium. Why are you posting on Medium, You promote your articles. And then like number two, like either that or you're just a boring writer. Like that's these are the only two explanations I have for this. I
that's
don't
very
know, maybe there are others.
yeah.
But like I
Yeah.
see these and I'm like, okay, and then I click and then usually sometimes like when I do it for when I'm like looking at other DevRel people, like click into it and I'm like, okay, you are a boring writer. Or there's some people who I'm like, no, your writing's actually not bad. Um,
Okay, we got to
like
double
you
click on that because you have created a lot of great technical content, and it sounds like you
yeah.
write a lot of other content as well. In your opinion, what really makes a good technical piece? What makes it something interesting that gets engagement, gets followers, is fun to read? What are you looking for there?
Okay. So
Yeah.
I will say this. What I see missing from a lot of technical pieces is tell me what the code does. Don't just like drop a code snippet and say like, here's the code. It does
Copy
this. And
paste.
it's like two sentences. It's like two sentences.
Oh,
It's like, no, treat me like an idiot. Like walk me through line by line. I'm a 5-year-old. Walk me through line by line. What does this code do? Because I'm seeing this for the first time. I'm seeing this
yes.
library for the first time. I'm like, I have no clue what you're doing here. What is this function? Why is this function here? Where is it from? Nobody tells you any of these things. And this is something that I consciously do with all of my writings. I say like line by line, here's what we're going to do. Not everything. So for example, if I'm doing something in like matplotlib or something like that, I'm not going to explain it too deep because I'm like, okay, if you're reading my stuff, there's a very high chance you have some familiarity with matplotlib.
Mhm.
Um, but like, I have some pieces that do go deep on that and I have like links for those too, right? So I kind of like have this thing where I'm like, that's number one. You got to explain your code. I think
Well,
number
that's
two
very
is you got to
important,
inject some.
though. I want to pause on that, though. That is important because
Yeah.
it's almost like earlier in data science, I saw this kind of trend a few years ago where we were just importing whatever Python library and running it. We didn't know how
Yeah.
like, the boosted tree model was actually working. So like, how do you choose the right parameters? Like it was the black box kind of like machine learning. And it sounds like this could almost happen in your world where it's like, oh, I just copied and pasted a line, 20 lines of code. I don't know what every line does. That actually sounds quite
That's
dangerous.
literally what people do in
Yes.
software dev. I see
Ah.
this so often. I've
Oh,
like read through code libraries where like I have like oh my god. Okay, one time I was working as a software developer in like a very like short like contracting role. And so
yeah.
I looked at their database. I'm sorry, not their database, their code base. And there was this code that I was like trying to work on. And so I was like asking this guy, I was like, what does this code do? And he was like, oh, I don't know. I copied it from Stack Overflow. And I was like, okay,
I have
okay,
nothing
cool.
against Stack Overflow. Like Google away, ChatGPT, whatever you need to do,
I
but
love it.
to
Yeah.
understand what the code is doing. Otherwise, how are you going to
Yeah, yeah.
do what you need it to do?
Yes. Yes, exactly. I mean, it happened to work for him. So I was like, wow, okay, like I mean, I'm not saying I don't do the same thing, but like when I go and like copy code
Yeah,
from Stack Overflow, I go and I'm like, okay, what is this actually doing? Like, I'm not just gonna be like copy paste. Okay, here we go.
interesting.
But
All right,
I have seen this happen, so
I got you way off track.
it's
That was really interesting. What's the second point, though?
what was the second point? What was I even talking about? Um, second
Oh,
point
what makes
of let's
good
see,
content, good
what makes good
technical
content?
content?
Okay,
Yeah,
yes, okay, yes, we've double stepped into that.
comment your
Okay.
code.
Um, Yes, yes. So A, explain what your code does. It doesn't have to be commented. Like you can like write it in the blog article, like what does this
Yeah.
code do, right? Um, and then like number two, inject some personality, like don't be, and I'm guilty of this too. I'm not saying I don't do this, but like don't be like boring, like
Yeah.
here's this and then this and then this and then this like the whole time. Like yes, you're gonna have to do that for part of it because when
Mhm.
you explain your code, that's basically what you have to do. But like inject some personality into it. Like when you write your intro, like
Make it a little
I
fun.
don't know.
Yeah.
Yeah, 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 yeah,
Yeah. I
yeah.
do see
Like
people
tell
getting
us like
creative
this.
with that. Yeah, tell a story, maybe
Yeah,
interesting data, or tell like a personal story where you like experienced using it, like just something interesting. There is a lot of like technical content that's great to learn, but like it's also kind of cool to like bring your personality to it. It just makes it more fun. Yeah. That's
yeah, yeah.
fun.
So those are really the two things that I think are like kind of like differentiating. I guess like there are also a couple other things that you can do. You can
Yeah.
do like SEO. You can go learn how to do SEO. Um, you can go like my SEO steps are very, very simple. I'm like I put the keyword I'm looking for in the title. I put it in the headers, and then I write it in the article a few times. And
Ah,
then I write it in like image captions. And then like,
okay.
okay, I put in the keyword there. That's all. That's it. That's it, And then we
Yeah.
just hope for the best. Um, it's okay, it worked somewhat last year. Let's see. Yeah, that's pretty much it really for good content.
Okay. What was your most
Yeah.
popular piece of content, or the piece of content you're most proud of?
Okay, these are two different answers.
Okay.
Um, so my most popular piece of content, I think, is why programming is easy, but software development is hard.
Hmm.
Or maybe it was which programming language should you learn or something like that. It was like one of these like opinionated pieces where I was basically just like spouting off about like random shit. Basically I was just like just giving my opinion on it. I was like, this is just what I think, and people like them. So those are my most popular pieces. Um, Actually, those are my most popular pieces in terms of like numbers of views. But I also have like some pieces that don't have as many views but are like popular in like other reasons, like people comment on them a lot. So like
Hmm.
one was like I had one that was like on like neural networks, on like building neural networks
Yeah.
and how you can like build a neural network from scratch. And so a lot of people ask questions about that. Um so yeah, those are two of it. One I'm most proud of. Oh, I don't know. That's a good question. Uh I would probably point people to the neural network piece. I think that one's really good. I think I did a good
Yeah.
job on that one.
Very
Yeah.
cool. We might link that one so y'all can find it. That sounds interesting. Cool.
Okay,
Well, I
cool.
want to I want to jump into a little bit of like some technical stuff here. So you're talking about how you're like collaborating a lot with data scientists, with engineers as they're building out like these LLM um, kind of systems. I'd love to dive a little bit into like the machine learning space and how vector databases fit in. And this is really interesting to me because I'll tell you a little bit of a story. A few jobs ago, I was working for Trunk Club, which is kind of like a Stitch Fix competitor. It was owned by Nordstrom, personal styling service. Really fun stuff. We were doing like
Okay.
personalization models, and we just had this idea. We were working on recommender systems, right? So we had these like user
Okay.
embeddings and like item embeddings, and we were like, what if we put these in a database, and then when we had to search across them to do like item similarity, we did a dot product across that database. And so I think we're starting to,
Ah,
you see what I'm saying? We're kind of like, I don't think there was the word vector database yet, or like we didn't know it.
yes.
We were kind of starting to like
Yes.
put these pieces together because we're trying to scale our recommender system, because you're trying to rank those items sometimes in real time while the user is interacting with them. So it's a space that's always been like super interesting to me, and I wish I could have got deeper there. So I'd love to kind of hear about like your perspective. Vector databases, I know they're like huge for LLMs, even outside of LLMs, like where are they kind of fitting in? What does that look like for you?
Yeah, product recommendations is actually before LLMs was probably the biggest use case for vector databases.
Okay,
Um,
yeah.
and there's a really, I mean, yeah, so like it just so happens that vectors are a really good way to like do product recommendation because you can search for similarity, right? Like semantic similarity.
Right, yeah.
But B, the other thing is like it's actually really easy to do um, vector like similarity search for product recommendations. And you can do it really quickly because you can quantize a lot of your vectors, because you don't need to have like insanely high accuracy. You don't need insanely high recall in
Okay.
order to get people like the products, right? Because I mean, they can find the product they're going to want
You're
like
trying
maybe
to
like
rank
1 or 2 clicks
things. You're
away.
trying to make it accessible.
Yeah,
It doesn't have to be exact. Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. Yes, yes, yes.
Same.
Um, but yeah, so product recommendation, super popular use case for vector databases. I think, let's see, I think like reverse image search is part of that, but that's also like another like popular use case.
Oh, is it like search and
I
retrieval
created,
kind of space?
uh-huh,
Is it like the search and retrieval kind of space? Am I
yeah,
thinking
kind of like
of
searching like taking an image and just being like, find me an image in the database that is the most similar to this one.
okay. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. And then semantic text search is like the other one, which is also like basically how it's used in LLM apps, is like the semantic text search stuff.
Okay. Yes.
So, and LLMs, vector databases have this like niche as like a data injection kind of like tool, as like probably like the data injection kind of tool. Um, so for people who are like familiar with working with LLMs, we're all like aware that LLMs have like data problems.
Sure.
I'm
Yeah.
not sure like how mainstream of like an opinion or of knowledge this is, but like um LLMs have like these data problems because they're not trained on up-to-date data. They don't have access to the data they need to do like what you want it to do, like, you know, your private data or whatever, and you don't want them to be trained on your private data, to be
Oh,
honest.
no.
Um yeah, right? Like it's kind of
Yeah.
weird. So vector databases kind of live there as this kind of like way to be like, okay, like GPT hasn't been updated since the data for GPT hasn't been updated since 2021. How do we fix that? Well, let's give it updated data and we'll just put it in the vector database. And, you know, you can compare using semantic text search to find like the most like similar data that you're looking for. So that's like kind of where they live in terms of like the LLM space. And they're like really yeah, LLMs have made Zillis much more popular recently. Like our webinar yesterday morning. Wow, okay. These days just keep flying by.
I
Our
know.
webinar yesterday morning,
Yeah.
yeah, our webinar yesterday morning had like
The
80 some
startup
people on it.
lifestyle.
And yeah, there's just so many things happening. Like I'm about to fly out to California, not next week, but the week, no, the Sunday, not this coming Sunday, but the Sunday after. And then in August, there's AI4,
Where's
which is
that?
in Las Vegas.
Oh,
Las
cool. I'm
Vegas.
always down to go
Yeah.
to Las Vegas.
Are
I
you
might
going to AI4?
I'll look it up. We'll see. I'm gonna be
Oh,
up and around. I do have like a couple trips, San Francisco and Chicago in August, so we'll see. But yeah,
okay.
that one
Oh,
looks
that would
fun.
be cool.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I'll be going to that, and then from there I fly into SF, and then I'm in SF for 2 days, and then there's this thing that's currently scheduled for August 12th. So I'm
Dude.
supposed to fly out of SF on the night of August 11th, which is a Friday, and there's
Okay,
this
this is
thing that's
something I
currently
wanted to
scheduled for
touch
August
on.
12th.
That's so funny. I wanted to touch on this as well talking to you because it's like the life of a like developer advocate. It's almost
Yeah,
like you're like it's like kind of the rock star lifestyle, but it's like not as cool because you're just like going city to city, but you're not playing shows, you're talking about machine learning. So you're like basically on tour. I've done this. Like my last year was like a ton of travel. I'm not developer advocate, but like customer success,
yeah,
like trainings. There's a lot of events like conferences and that kind of thing. So yeah, I've like
yeah,
definitely lived that lifestyle and it kind of wears on you. And I had this thought, I'm like, well, rock stars have like a whole bunch of people traveling with them, like helping them out. Like, where are
yeah.
my people? But it looks
I
like
know,
you're
right?
doing that lifestyle.
Oh yeah, oh my God. I'm like, there's this event that's scheduled for August 12th right now, and I'm like really hoping it gets pushed back because it's not officially announced yet. But I'm like, if I have to fly from Seattle to New York City overnight from August 11th to August 12th and then give a talk on August 12th, I'm gonna like be like half asleep.
You
I
know
was like,
what
this
I
is gonna
did?
be wild.
I just have to one up you
What?
here. I'm sorry to do it. It won't one up you, but it's
Okay,
really
okay.
funny. So
Yes,
I
okay.
planned a ski trip to Vail, and I planned it for the wrong
Okay.
because I had to be in Boston for like customer meetings the next week. Well, I thought it was
Oh,
next week, but it turned out that I had to be like in Boston directly after Vail. So I took like a red eye flight. I drove down the mountains, like from the Colorado mountains down to the Denver
yeah.
airport, got on a red eye. So from going like the elevation Vail got on a red-eye flight, ended up in Boston, landed at 5 a.m., checked into the hotel, just
Oh
like
my
put my
God.
stuff down and went to a customer site and just like ran a meeting. It was incredible.
Wow.
Not something I'd want to repeat.
Yeah.
You
Yeah.
can
See, yeah, that
understand.
is, yeah, that is incredible. Exactly. Like that's like something where I'm like, I'm really not trying to take a red eye and then be at an event for a day. Like, can I? Like, yes. Do I want to? Like, not really.
Okay, so on this topic,
No.
tell us a little bit more about like community building, like running events, because I think that that is a very kind of unique skill set for your kind of role.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes, I think that yes, I think a lot of DevRel people do end up doing the community stuff and running these events or being part of these events or speaking at
Yeah.
these events or whatever. I personally just find it fun to organize these events. Like, look, I was the guy who was organizing parties at the end of high school, like I like organizing things.
Yes.
So it's like you call up your friends and you're like, "Hey, we're having an event. Like, come out, come say hi. And one of the things about organizing these events, I think that is like kind of like this is like a little bit of a hack, is like when you're doing your first events, if you have friends in the area who work in your space, like call them up and be like, hey, like I'm doing this, like I need you to come out. They don't even have to be your target audience. They can be
Yeah.
like kind of different, but like it'll make your first event look better. And you can kind of do this with like, a few friends for like other events, or like, you can call in your friends to say no the first time, because then like they're like, okay, I said no the first time. I'll probably, I'll go to this one.
I think you're just trying
Um,
to build up your entourage.
yeah, but like you get these people to kind of like come out to your events, they make it look better. And then as for like one of the cool things about organizing events, oh my God, the toughest thing about organizing events in Seattle, venue, finding a
Oh,
good
okay.
venue. Okay. Especially when your events are small, like your events are like 20, 30, 40 people, like it's not that hard to find a venue. You can go out to a brewery, you can go out to a bar, you can like book it, you can just show up and just have a large group. Um, but when your events get to like 100 plus 150, you're
Yeah.
pretty limited.
Yes.
And that's like one of those things where I'm like, okay, I need to go build like these relationships with the people who like have these venues, or like who like run these venues, so I can understand like what the hell's going on. Like, how
Yeah.
do I find like the right ones? Because it's really tough. It's
Yeah.
just like really hard to find. There's just not a lot of them.
You don't want to bring like
um
50 people into a brewery. It'll overwhelm the venue. Yeah, you gotta have like
yeah.
space for that kind of thing. Yeah.
Yeah. And especially like if you want to give a talk, then you need like,
Yeah.
AV and chairs and you don't need tables, I guess, but Wi-Fi and stuff like that. So there's a lot that goes into it. I don't do any of the really fancy stuff. I don't do any of the heavy logistics right now. My events are all small right now. I'm just like, we're gonna do some happy hours. Yeah, okay.
Yeah, easy.
Uh yeah, or we're gonna do like an online webinar or something like that, right? So these are like easy lifts, but when you get into like running the in-person events, there are like big lifts. Like you gotta get the food scheduled and stuff like that. Um, I think also it's at the start, it's tough to find speakers unless you already know people. If you're already kind of in the community, maybe it's easier. But at the start, it's kind of tough to find speakers. It's also tough to find sponsors, but as you get more and more, as your events get larger, as you like build your brand, basically, it becomes easier to do that.
Gotcha.
Um, yeah, so I just like doing it. I think that if you like doing it, you should, go for it. I think if it's like something where you're like, oh, I have to organize this thing. I have to like ask people if they can come like speak at my event. I have to find a venue. Like I have to do this. Which I get too sometimes, by the way. I'm like, oh, I don't want to do this, but then I'll just like push it off to the next day. I like having the event happen, right?
Yeah.
And so like if like if you're not into it, then you should probably just like then there's generally somebody on the team who can do it, right?
Gotcha.
But yeah, I think this is something that is I don't actually know how common it is in DevRel. I think I know a lot of DevRel people who go and like attend events and like speak at events. I
Hmm.
don't know how common it is to have people doing the organization. I feel like that's like actually, yeah, that might be slightly different. So
Okay, gotcha. But still like
yeah,
pretty
yeah.
involved traveling out to these things, getting those frequent flyer miles, I hope.
Oh yes. I've
Yeah,
got Delta, so I'm getting my Sky Miles.
there you
I'm
go.
putting in my frequent flyers number. Yeah.
All right, let's get technical. Let's dive in a little bit more into like the LLMs, the tooling and like frameworks around that, because you're talking to people, it sounds like day to day about what they're building. This is a really interesting area to me because it's not like we figured it out yet. You're kind of out
Yeah.
trying to tinker, build things, see what works, see what doesn't. It's not like machine learning where we kind of have figured out a lot of things that work and can kind of repeat that. So I'm really just kind of curious to like hear about like tooling, frameworks, what kinds of things people are building, best practices they're learning. Yeah, what does it look like out there?
Yeah, I think right now the two biggest frameworks that I see with LLMs that people are using are Llama Index and LangChain. Have you heard of these?
Both of them, yes. Yeah.
Both of them, right? Okay, yeah. So we sorry, use Llama Index and LangChain quite a bit to create some like small like POC type apps.
Mhm.
And so one thing I've seen that's like really common or that's like people are really asking for is this like multi-document query engine. Like how can we query multiple documents? Especially this is especially common in enterprise, right?
Yeah.
And so that was like one of my pieces that I made with Llama Index and LangChain that was really popular. And I used both of them because I wanted to call it the LLM stack because I thought it was funny. Because you got Llama Index, LangChain, and Milvus. And so I was like, ah, yes,
Oh
okay.
gosh.
So
I
oh,
don't
and
think
also
that's
like
how
the
you're
way
supposed to choose your tech tools, but I won't be too hard on you for that one. It's a great name.
it's a good name. Yeah, exactly. I'm like, yes, this is exactly how I'm
Explain
gonna
why you
pick
chose
this.
that tech stack.
Um,
Oh,
exactly. Why
that's
did you
great.
choose the LLM tech stack? Well, I'm building an LLM app. Um, but yeah, so that's like one thing that's been really common with Llama. And so
Yeah.
I built this app that did that. People have written people asked a lot about that. I think like the way that I kind of see the difference between Llama Index and LangChain is that like Llama Index is more for structuring like or for like yeah for like structuring your data or for structuring the way you access your data. And I feel like LangChain is more for structuring the way you talk to the LLM, the way that you access the LLM.
Yeah. Okay.
So that's kind of yeah, that's what I see as like the difference between these two. I could be wrong. And you know, people who work there might see them differently, but this is just my opinion on it. But I think these are the two biggest frameworks. AutoGPT was really popular for a while and still like got and like honestly the amount of stars they got on GitHub, like insanity. Okay. They like went from like I don't know, 0 to like 130K in like 2 months or something like that. I was like, what am I seeing here?
Like zero to
And
hero.
like the
Yeah.
yeah. And like the best thing about this, or possibly the worst thing about this, is that it doesn't work, right? Like AutoGPT doesn't actually work. It's just like it's a prototype. It's a prototype, but
Okay.
it's really tough for people to get it to do anything. Like I don't know if you've seen like the subreddit for AutoGPT, but there's like a
No.
subreddit for AutoGPT, and all it is, not all it is, but a lot of what it is people being like, has anybody gotten this thing to work?
See, that's
And I
why it's
just think
so
it's
hard in this field right now. It's like we don't know quite what tools to work with, to invest in, and you just kind of have to try it and see what happens. I feel like, yeah. Oh, did I lose you for a bit?
Ooh.
You're back.
Yes, I just disconnected
You
a
froze
little
and you're
bit. Yeah,
back.
okay, I'm back. Okay,
Okay.
cool.
But yeah, I was just saying
Okay.
that that's one of the challenges.
Wait, what did you just say?
Yeah, like being on the kind of like research side of things, like trying to tinker with, experiment, try different LLMs, put them together. That's one of the challenges is we don't know exactly what tools to choose. I feel like you just kind of have to try it and see what works and what doesn't. It's kind of like a trial and error thing. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. I think this is going to be like one of those like challenges that, and I hear this from other people too, is that this is going to be one of those challenges that we have like moving forward with this time technology. Is like, how do we like, how do we measure our LLM's like performance, our LLM apps performance, right?
Yep.
There are some cases where it's really easy to do, right? Like when you're answering like test questions, easy.
Yeah.
You can just say, is this the right answer? But then when it comes to things like solving, like let's say you have like you say you have your LLM doing something like customer service, like something like that, and you want to like measure like, is this doing a good job? Like, is this, how do you measure that? Is it that you're closing these like customer queries really quickly? Is it that like the customers are all like giving like a higher rating? Is
Yeah.
it
What are
that
you
like
optimizing? And what
yeah,
do you
like what are you
measure?
optimizing for?
Yeah.
Yeah, what do you measure for? And like, especially because this stuff is qualitative. Like there's all
Huh?
like we haven't found a way to really quantify like how we work with LLMs, right?
Yeah.
So yeah, that's kind of like this space is all very new. There's a lot of stuff happening. I mean, we're basically less than a year in. We're less than a
Yeah.
year in right now,
Uh-huh.
and it's exploded. So
Yeah.
in 5 to 10 years, like in 24 months, in 2 years, 3 years, like who knows what we're gonna be doing with these things.
It'll be fascinating to see. Yeah, I'm curious to hear from you, just like any recommendations you might have for people who are starting to tinker with LLMs, maybe trying different frameworks. Yeah, what recommendations would you give to those folks? Like where to start?
Yeah, so there's a ton of, I mean, there's obviously like now everybody is like, oh, I'm an AI expert, but um there are a ton of actually good resources. I mean, like I can send some like links of things that I built. But I would say like I just go on just go on Reddit and just go
Mm.
on like what would be a good place to find these? I mean, I'm gonna plug my Reddit here. I have this Reddit called AI Agents that you can find a lot of them in. I think
Okay.
AI underscore agents. I think AI prompt engineering also has a lot of these. And then there's one called I think I don't know if r slash machine learning has a lot of these, but I think r slash learn machine learning has some of these tutorials in there. Um, yeah, there's a lot of these on Reddit, which is actually where I find a lot of my resources. Which also, I don't know if you heard about this, but there was like the whole like Reddit strike recently.
I did
They
not hear
had
about
like
that.
oh my God, okay, Reddit's API used to be free,
Yeah.
and then now they're like, now we're gonna charge people for it. And they like shut down like a bunch of like huge bots because like it was like these bots were like doing
Everything
yeah,
built
and
into
then
that.
like
Yeah. Wow.
yeah, yeah, and then all the mods like a bunch of mods went on strike, and then like there were like Reddit blackouts where they just like locked the subreddits and you're like you can't
What?
post here. And then Reddit came in and like the Reddit admins were like, okay, if you don't unlock these subreddits, we're gonna kick you from being a mod. And they had they just like wiped like a bunch of mods off. And I was like, wow, this is so funny. This
Wow.
is such a
Reddit
ridiculous like
drama.
thing. I know, right?
I did not know about that. That's
So
fascinating.
yeah,
Well,
yeah.
what
So
I'll do
but
is
I
I'll
still think it's a good resource.
yeah, yeah, thanks for sharing that with us. What I'll do is I'll link that resource out so people can find it. It does sound like a great kind of place to start, be part of the conversation, see what other people are doing in LLMs.
Hmm.
Awesome. Well, is there anything else that we should touch on? Any topics that we didn't get to today that you wanted to talk through?
Um, AI is taking over the world.
I hope
Should
it's
pay
not.
attention, you know?
I do think it's going to be a significant part of the world, but it's not going to take over. I don't know. What do you think? Hot takes.
Oh, I don't know. Oh, okay. My like my desire, my ideal results from what happens with AI is that we just like get singularity and we just all end up as like virtual like avatars,
It sounds
which may
horrible.
actually end up which actually may end up in us living the exact same lives that we're living right now. So who knows?
Maybe
Um, but yeah,
maybe that's how we got here in the first place. That's the simulation theory.
exactly,
Okay.
exactly. Yes, yes.
On that note, I'm gonna let that think that one through. Drop a comment. I'd love to hear what people think of that one. Awesome. Thank you so much for being on the show. It was really great to hear your perspective.
Yeah. Thanks for having me. This is great.
Great. Take care.